Assalamu alaikum. If you haven't guessed by now, our location today is a place of worship for the religion known as Islam. We're here today at the Masjid Talim Muhammad, which is not only an historic Islamic site, it's actually the first masjid to be built from the ground up by indigenous Muslims in the Southwest. This marks the home of a tradition that has influenced African Americans for decades and has also helped to nurture the culture of hip hop. Now we're going to talk a bit more about that, and we're also going to make sure and give you a few examples of how the Nation of Islam, as well as the 5% Nation, has represented itself in hip hop and how hip hop has represented these traditions. Now we've discussed some of the history of these two traditions, but now we want to talk about the history of their connection to the hip hop culture. Let's talk a bit about how these traditions have been represented in hip hop symbols. Artists such as Brand Nubians or Poor Righteous Teachers have often for years incorporated Islamic themes and symbolism into their music, as well as in their daily appearance or their music videos. It was very easy in hip hop to find out who was a Muslim, and even more so who was a member of the 5% Nation. Most of them carried the symbol of the 5% Nation, which was the star inside the crescent, on their kufis or either on necklaces or, to some points, jewelry. Even recently, artists as successful as Jay-Z has been known to walk around with his pendant with the star inside the crescent. And this year at the Brooklyn Hip Hop Festival, he actually passed that chain and pendant on to one of his artists, Jay Electronica, who is not only a practicing Muslim, but is also a member of the FOI and had FOI security escort him around the festival that week. Now these two traditions have also been represented within hip hop culture through language. A lot of the terminology that we use inside of hip hop culture has actually been appropriated from the 5%ers as well as Islamic culture. Terms like knowledge is born or knowledge being born, which is usually used by MCs such as Rakim or Big Daddy Kane, is a way of them identifying themselves not only as Muslim, but as 5%ers. There's a totally different lexicon that's used from people from these different nations. Totally different alphabets, totally different use of the alphabet as well. Letters themselves not only exist as letters, but also as meanings, and there are lessons that are being taught within that. Every number also has a meaning, and the combining of these numbers and these letters is what people call mathematics within the 5% Nation. Now, another term that hip hop has appropriated from the 5% Nation is word is bond. Word is bond is a statement that people make when they want people to know that what they're saying is an actual fact and true to belief. The 5% Nation would use this term word is bond when they would build with each other. Now building between 5%ers is basically going back and forth talking about different tenets or different lessons that they've learned and applied to their everyday life. Muslims who would hear these different lessons from their brothers would acknowledge their lessons by saying word is bond. Saying word is bond meant that they understood where their brother was coming from, and even in certain terms meant that they had been through what their brother had been through. There's a huge list of terminology that hip hop has appropriated, and we'll try to make some of that terminology available for you in the Backstage Pass. Hip hop culture also advocates conversation into these two traditions. Now, primarily the conversation is between hip hop and the 5% Nation. What started as something that was locally practiced on the streets of New York was spread throughout the country and also around the world by hip hop artists who not only advocated the religion, but practiced it. Different practicing musicians would try to incorporate different themes from the nation into their music. Now, for a lot of Muslims, there was always an issue about combining music with praise, and hip hop artists have had to walk that line. Artists like Freeway, who have already made their pilgrimage to Mecca and is a very strong practicing Muslim, has always talked about how difficult it is for him to be as devout as he would like to be while being seen by his elders as somewhat non-traditional in his practices. But one thing's for sure, hip hop has always stood tall with our Muslim counterparts. As our country went into war recently, a lot of Americans started to have anti-Islamic or anti-Muslim views. Hip hop culture worked very hard to educate America about our Muslim brothers and sisters in America, and to let them know that every Muslim was not out to, quote, get you, and that every Muslim in America was not a terrorist like some of their brothers. Hip hop has also helped to show that just because you're a Muslim in America doesn't mean that you're not American. Now, we've taken you on a quick tour of these two traditions, and we've also tried to show you how these traditions inform hip hop culture. Now, it's hard to deny that these connections are deep and impressive, but if I know you, you'll probably want a little bit more information. That's not a problem. You already know what you need to do. Go to the bonus reel to check out more of this conversation. And for those of you out there that like more information on the Masjid Talim Muhammad, We've made that available for you as well in the Backstage Pass.